Hello, it's what is today? April the 26th, and we're ready for lesson 116 in a workbook for students and a course in miracles. Lesson 116, God's will for me is perfect happiness. I share God's will for happiness for me. Okay, before we read that, let's talk about yesterday's lesson. Did you let's just look at it quickly. Salvation is my only function here, and my part is essential to God's plan for salvation. Salvation is my only function here. I like this first thing that he says about it. My function here is to forgive the world for all the errors I have made. Not it has made. I have made. Why is that? Because you're the only one you have any power over. You can change your thoughts, and your pictorial representation of your thoughts, which is the world, has to change. So work with yourself. My function here is to forgive the world for all the errors I have made. I call that working out your own salvation with fear and trembling, to quote something from the Bible. For thus am I released from them with all the world. What? Let me read it one more time. My function here is to forgive the world for all the errors I have made. For thus am I released from them, the errors, with all the world. See, everyone's freed. We're all freed together. We need to start thinking of ourselves as one people, one family, one group, we're all one. We're all the family of humanity, the children of God. One brotherhood. My part is essential to God's plan for salvation. Okay? That was yesterday's. My part is essential to God's plan for salvation. You said that on the half hour, and say salvation is my only function here on the hour, and try to extend it throughout the hour to where you kind of blend them and remember or think about what you're doing and how it applies. Were you able to make any success? Salvation is my only function here, and my part is essential to God's plan for salvation. I'm essential to the plan of God for the salvation of the world. For he gave me his plan that I might save the world. He gave me his plan, which is to, free myself from errors. I'm essential to the plan of God for the salvation of the world. I'm essential. Once I change, the whole world changes. And each of us can say that. And it's something that is divine. It's sacred. Our oneness. Lesson 115. Okay, all right. Let's see. Hey, look what I've got. I want to show you a couple things. I had a bunch of garlic today that I wanted to move. So I transplanted a lot of it. Well, here I just want to show you how I transplant it. I'd bring a garden pick. And here's my garden pick. This is my favorite tool for the Ozarks, at least my property. I've got a lot of rock and hard and clay, and stands about 3 foot tall, and it's just a great tool for loosening up around the garlic when I'm getting ready to move it. I've got a bunch of wild garlic that it's stuff I planted, but it kind of got all over the yard, and now it clumps up and I use these clumps. I get them in the spring, and I had some places I wanted to move these out of the way. So I'm going to make a little mess, but I'm going to show you. Okay, I'm going to take this, and what I do is I just split it apart. I soak it in water, and then I pull them apart. Yep. And then I pull them apart again, and those will get planted. And I try to do them, day or two after or sometimes the same time. The quicker you can get it out of the ground and back into new spot, the less stress it is. And this is just when I wanted to move my garlic. Okay, and I also have these. Look what I've got here. These are garlic or chives. They're wild chives, but they're chives that I planted, and I just wanted to move them too. But aren't they so pretty? A little purple flower, just kind of a little garlic flavor smell. And I got one more thing. It has a really wonderful smell. Do y'all know what that is? I picked it off. It's out of my garden too. It's a lilac bush I have growing out there. Butterflies were working on it today. And anyway, it was some of it that was in the path. I wanted to trim it out. I made a little flower out of it, put it in some water in a vase. Okay, now let's see our lesson 116. Before we go to that, I still want to do one more thing. Well, we've already been we're only about 5 minutes in. Let's take a minute. We got 5 minutes. Yesterday we read the introduction. I want to read it again. Everything's based on this. I want you to particularly remember the last 3 sentences. Nothing real can be threatened. Nothing unreal exists. Herein lies the peace of God. And how did we get there? This is a course in miracles. It is a required course. Only the time you take it is voluntary. Free will does not mean that you can establish the curriculum. It means only that you may elect what you want to take at a given time. The course does not aim at teaching the meaning of love, for that is beyond what can be taught. It does aim, however, at removing the blocks to the awareness of love's presence, which is your natural inheritance. The opposite of love is fear, but what is all-encompassing can have no opposite. This course can therefore be summed up very simply in this way. Nothing real can be threatened. Nothing unreal exists. Herein lies the peace of God. Okay. I wanted to show you, there's one other tool that I meant to show you. I use that quite a bit for transplanting in the spring. Little garden trowel, they call these. So, those are a couple tools you'd probably want. In the text, Introduction to Miracles. Principle of miracles. Number 1, there's no order of difficulty among miracles. One is not harder or bigger than another. They are all the same. All expressions of love are maximal. There's no order of difficulty among miracles. Now, isn't that something? We'd think, some of those our separated self would think some miracles would be harder to do than others. He's saying, no, there's no order of difficulty among miracles. One is not harder or bigger than another. They're all the same. And then he ends it by saying all expressions of love are maximal. So he's calling a miracle an expression of love. And that's maximal. It's integrated. It's complete. Number 2, miracles as such do not matter. Okay, whether or not we actually do something that speeds up time or seems to defy the laws of time and space and has what would have taken thousands of years to happen immediately. He's saying that doesn't matter. Miracles as such do not matter. The only thing that matters is their source, and that's with a capital S, which is far beyond human evaluation. Okay, so the miracle doesn't matter, but the creator of the miracle matters. And that's beyond our ability, our human evaluation, way beyond. Number 3, miracles occur naturally as expressions of love. Miracles occur naturally as expressions of love. The real miracle is the love that inspires them. In this sense, everything that comes from love is a miracle. I like that. Miracles occur naturally as expressions of love. The real miracle is the love that inspires them. In this sense, everything that comes from love is a miracle. Well, that's the first 3 principles of miracles. We're beginning the text. We're going to kind of do a little reading of the text as we go along, and we won't take too long, but that way, eventually we need to get the text read. It's the theoretical concepts of why miracles work. Right now in the workbook, we're working through the practical experiencing of the miracle, okay? We're learning that it works and how to actually make it work. All right? So we'll dive deep into the theory in the text as we read along. All right, let's go ahead and do lesson 116. For morning and evening review, we will be reviewing lesson 101 and 102. 101 being God's will for me is perfect happiness. God's will for me is perfect happiness. Are you going to settle into that and really feel it? Really allow yourself to be happy? God's will for you is perfect happiness. God's will is perfect happiness for me, and I can suffer, but from the belief there is another will apart from His. Only one will, and that's God. God's will is perfect happiness for me, and I can suffer, but from the belief there is another will apart from His. There's only one will, and that's God's. Let's really settle into that and take that with us today. I share God's will for happiness for me. That was lesson 102, our review. I share God's will for happiness for me. Now you're making a dedication. First, in the first lesson, you acknowledge God's will for me is perfect happiness. But in the second lesson, you actually make the dedication to it. I share God's will for happiness for me. At least that's how I see it. You could also just think, well, it's something that's going on. I share God's will for happiness for me. It's something that's going on no matter what. Well, you might as well be aware of it and enjoy it. I share God's will for happiness for me. I share my Father's will for me, His Son. I share my Father's will for me, His Son. What He has given me is all I want. What He has given me is all I want. What He has given me is all there is. So that what He's given you is all you want, and it's all that what He has given you is all there is. So let's recognize that this happiness is something that He wants to give us and that He's already given us, and it's what is ours. And let's acknowledge it. Let's walk in it. Let's claim it. Let's be it. Let's let it bubble out. It's the fountain that never goes dry. It's our connection with Source. It's where we get all our true happiness, our true joy. Okay? And the only joy and happiness that really is real. On the hour today, let's say God's will for me is perfect happiness. And then let it linger in your mind and apply it to what's going on. Put a smile on your face today. Look for ways to spread that joy, because that's how it'll come back to you, by giving it away. Remember, what I give is what I receive. Giving and receiving are one in truth. And on the half hour, I share God's will for happiness for me. Oh, I'm sharing God's will for happiness for me. I'm feeling it. I'm loving it. Okay? So let's do that. And I will see you tomorrow. And it's nice that we finally got started on the text. Now, we may not make it through the whole text by the end of the year, but you may not do these lessons perfectly, and you may need to do them again. And not that you failed. It's just to think of it as maybe this is maybe really a 4-year course for most people, and we just go through it 4 times. And we can get a little more strength the second time through. I know I've been doing it for years. I've been through it a number of times, and I kept thinking, if I could get it just perfect, I know I'd be enlightened. Anyway, I'm just glad that I can be happy. So much more happy than what I would have been if I thought that there was not a guide that brought about my happy state. So, for today, God's will for me is perfect happiness. I share God's will for happiness for me.